is gender? Gender is a complex web of many ideas and social expectations. It's an entirely social construct. It's the rules and expectations we put on people's behavior. It's a grammatical rule. It's a spectrum. It's a tool of oppression and division. It's a set of social norms. It's a vibe. According to the textbook, children develop gender identity between roughly 18 months and 3 years. It's developed through social interactions, and most people's biological sex and gender identity will match up. But the way the textbook explains it makes it seem like trans people are some sort of crazy fluke and completely overlooks the existence of intersex people. I'm not going to get into it here because it is way out of the scope of this assignment, but we do know there is a biological component to someone's gender identity. What it is exactly, we don't fully understand yet, but we do know for a fact it exists. The textbook also talks about how gender is extremely performative. Gender is something you have to take part in. It is a performance and a set of rules. I can say from my own experience, half the way people perceive you is how you present and act. Drag is a great example of how performative gender really is. The art form of drag is a performance of gender. And with that logic, everybody does drag. Quote RuPaul,
"You know, you're born naked and the rest is drag."
The assigned chapter looks at how tasks in society are defined as men's work or women's work. The gender division of labor is determined by 3 important factors. 1. The type of substance basis. 2. Labor supply and demand. And 3. The compatibility of women's child-rearing responsibilities with specific forms of work. This part in the chapter investigates various socioeconomic systems and how gender roles are defined with them. In hunting and gathering societies, men hunt and women gather food, resulting in a fairly equal division of labor. The lack of food access has resulted in a little socioeconomic stratification. In other words, the gender relations are cooperative because neither sex can meet all of their needs on its own. In horticultural and pastoral societies, the use of hand tools allow women to contribute significantly to food production. Gender equality exists when men and women contribute equally, but it changes when pastoralism emerges, resulting in a lower status for women in herding societies. Women's essential function in some pastoral societies is associated with their ability to produce male heirs. In post-industrial societies, characterized by technology-driven, service-based economy, while women have more opportunity for paid employment, gender divisions in the workforce persist. Women continue to suffer income inequality, employment segregation, and work-life balance issues.
In industrial countries, jobs are often segregated by gender. Women are predominantly concentrated in lower-paying and less prestigious occupations. This creates limited opportunities and continues to reinforce stereotypes regarding gender roles. The wage gap between men and women is completely evident, being that women are earning just over 70 cents for every dollar that is being earned by a man. For pay equity and employment equity, having strategical notions like ensuring the amount of money someone is making is within reflection of the worth of the job and not based on the gender of the worker, and eliminating all discrimination. Women's double day, on top of women having to balance their jobs in which they're getting paid for and also have to come home and take care of their undomestic responsibilities. Despite women also having full-time jobs, they also have to bear the brunt of taking care of the household duties. Most maintain primary responsibility for child care, elder care, household work, shopping, and meal preparation, and this leads to ongoing gender inequality. And so these days you notice more men stepping into household roles and having gradually increased their participation. However, recent times they use surveys and they have confirmed that the burden of unpaid work disproportionately falls onto women. And to further summarize that part of the chapter, the overall idea of this chapter was to highlight the true nature of gender inequality in the workplace. Thankfully, a number of strategies have been implemented in order to attempt to achieve more sustainable gender equality. It's now a matter of how society will do its job of actually cooperating with the new regulations.
Next is a summary of the different perspectives in gender stratification. First is the functionalist perspective. Through this perspective, they believe that men and women should have their own separate roles when dealing with family and society. An example of these set roles is through biological beliefs. Since men look stronger than women, they should have more physical roles like being the ones to go out and do labor, and women are seen as the ones to bear and take care of the child. Altogether, the traditional division of labor should be that the woman stay at home to take care of everything while the man goes out to make money for the family. The second perspective is the neoclassical economic perspective that explains how gender differences can impact economic outcomes. Using the human capital model to explain this perspective, they believe that when women take a leave of absence to go take care of their child and come back after months of not working, it is a result of why there is a gender wage difference. Other examples are the lack of education or experience one might counter because of their gender. The third perspective is the conflict perspective that focuses on the inequality and power struggles of how society is shaped, mostly being men dominating and controlling over women. Men can be seen as the ones in control in workplace environments, but also the head of the house. Because of the power differences, women need to find a way to work in the society, and that is through trading in their emotional support and sexual resources for the man's financial support. Another perspective is the feminist perspective, which analyzes how norms, roles, and institutions limit women's behavior by challenging traditional roles that they believe to not be natural but enforced through political, cultural, and economic structures. An example of this would be the gender roles that women try to fight to change, like not just staying home and taking care of the children, but also providing financial support for the family, and men taking on more roles around the house, which has become more common in the newer generations. The final perspective mentioned in the chapter is the symbolic interactionist perspective, which focuses on the micro level, including person's identity and social interactions. This perspective talks about doing gender, which is how everyday social interactions display characteristics of a specific gender. Gender is not something fixed through biology, but rather something that is accomplished. An example being a trans woman transitioning to live as a woman would do gender by adapting feminine clothing and appearance, gender behavior, and correcting others when being misgendered. These would be the different ways in which she expresses her identity as a woman.
We chose to look into this article about gender roles in the workplace system because while entrepreneurship environment has come a long way for women, they still have had a hard time compared to men. This examines how, while there are laws placed in order to treat everyone equally, people still find a way to work around them. Specifically in this article, men have far more connections to resources at their disposal. So while people may be getting around legally, they still tend to favor men over women when collaborating. And I think that another example of this is Dan Schneider and how he hired two women and they had to share a salary even though they were doing two separate lines of work. But he hired a man with no experience to take on a more powerful role. Even though these women had the experience, they had all the qualifications, he hired a man who had no experience and he was paid more than these women and they had to share a salary. The study highlights gender role incongruity and audience-based gender biases, showing how decision makers, even if it not personally biased, favor men when they anticipate third-party preferences for male candidates in male-type occupations. The research provides empirical evidence that women receive fewer business referrals than men in male-dominant fields, which contributes to reduced financial opportunities and earnings, reinforcing the gender wage gap. The study indirectly highlights barriers to employment equity as women in male-typed roles face difficulties in securing business connections, even when they have equal qualifications and access. The findings reinforce the existence of a patriarchal system where men are often seen as more competent in male-type roles, while there's little to no evidence that women are similarly favored in female-type roles. The research supports feminist arguments that structurally based rather than just individual discrimination contribute to gender inequality, advocating for a deeper understanding of systemic barriers that hinder women's professional advancements.
Almost immediately after coming into office, Donald Trump signed an executive order declaring the United States only recognizes male and female, and it would be impossible to legally change your gender. This policy has manifested in the confiscation of documents of any trans person trying to get their passport updated with their gender marker changed. People with X-gender markers are also having their passports confiscated on return to the country. Other rights for trans people are being stripped away, like making it illegal for trans women to compete in college-level sports, even though there were 10 competing in college-level sports. 10 trans women competing in college-level sports, and they banned it for them. There has also been a mass removal of any mention of trans people from government websites. Most concerningly, info about trans-specific healthcare has been removed from the CDC's website. All I'm saying is that one of the first Nazi book burnings was at a trans healthcare clinic. All this to say, the US government is actively trying to genocide trans people. They don't need to outright kill trans people to do this. What they are trying to do is to make it impossible to live as a trans person in public.
Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely,
so that they just go away. Whether that be we die of preventable medical issues, kill ourselves, or detransition and go back into the closet, and that all the trans people still in the closet will stay there. This is what trans genocide looks like. Connecting this to conflict theory, it is a way to spread fascism and concentrate power by having a scapegoat for the government to fearmonger and pin all of society's problems on. They are able to use it in a way to concentrate power and to prevent the general public from realizing the actual 1% of the population they should care about is the one that owns 43% of all the world's wealth.